The Concord disaster was a complete embarrassment, and we all saw it coming. Just months ago, the gaming community collectively rolled its eyes as PlayStation's State of Play event brazenly forced a certain game upon us well past the point of tolerance. What should have been an exciting showcase of cutting-edge titles turned into bitter disappointment, as nearly half the presentation was dedicated to one soulless, overly corporate game. To many, Concord represented everything wrong with modern gaming, a lifeless cash grab that confirmed our worst fears. Sony had lost touch with its audience, chasing microtransactions and pandering to what they called the modern audience, a demographic many of us suspect doesn't even exist in any meaningful way. Of course, past this point, the inevitable happened. Despite the $400 million Sony sunk into the project and the desperate marketing push, Concord was unceremoniously cancelled just 12 days after launch. But perhaps what makes this whole tale most embarrassing is that it feels like this all happened not once, but twice. For those who actually pay attention to the industry, the Concord fiasco probably felt like a tiresome case of deja vu. And rightly so. Not too long ago, Sega poured an obscene amount of cash into allowing Western devs to create virtually the same embarrassing game and suffer the same indignity of cancelling that cringeworthy mess. And yet PlayStation managed to walk right into the same trap. Which raises the question, how could they not have learned from Sega's spectacular failure? Was a California-based PlayStation brand's level of hubris so high that they just felt invincible, believing they could succeed where others had failed by sheer force of their reputation? Or was Sega's forgotten failure something quite different? Let's find out. I am Lady Decade, and this is the forgotten other Concord disaster that Sony should never, ever have ignored. Let's be honest, the West has been on top form recently when it comes to releasing soulless corporate cash grabs that are all contributing towards the next potential video game crash. Thankfully though, amongst this sea of shit, diamonds can be found in the excrement. Score massive discounts on incredible games like Space Marine 2, Black Myth Wukong Metaphor, and the all-new PC version of Final Fantasy XVI through my affiliate links below. Save up to 90% on thousands of modern, AAA, retro, and indie titles just by using the links in my pinned comments. Snag amazing deals and support my content at the same time. Happy shopping. A couple of years back, GameRant and other online news outlets reported that Sega had cautiously revealed its ambitious plans to develop what they called a super game, a massive project set to unfold over a 5-year timeline. At the time of the announcement, a few details were shared about the project's nature, components, or overall design, but the general consensus was that this endeavour would play a crucial role in revitalising the company's iconic classic intellectual properties. Fast forward, and while Sega has indeed announced plans to revive many of its beloved classic IPs, none of these exciting ventures seem to be linked to the so-called Super Game that was once teased with such anticipation. A game that, perhaps looking back at all of this now, resulted in Sega's very own Concord disaster. Oh, and just to be clear, when I use the term Super Game, it's not some catchy phrase I pulled out of thin air to spice up the video title. No, it's Sega's own term, as ridiculous as it sounds. According to Tweaktown.com, Sega's idea of a super game is essentially a rehash of the tired live service or games as a service model, but of course, with their own arbitrary criteria. What makes this quite amusing is that if you know your gaming history, then you will know that the name Sega is an abbreviation of Service Games, derived from the company's original focus on providing coin-operated amusement machines for US military bases. Initially, they specialized in jukeboxes and other types of service-based entertainment before transitioning into video games. As for Sega adopting the games as a service, GAS model, the irony is rich because because their origins lie in providing physical machines as a service where customers would pay to play. Fast forward to modern times, and games as a service essentially follows the same principle but in a digital form. Instead of paying per play in arcades, players now pay for ongoing access or content in games via subscriptions, microtransactions, or season passes. Essentially, they are greedy, penny-pinching bastards, but they always have been. By Sega's logic, for a game to qualify as a super game, it must target a staggering $1 billion in lifetime revenue. An ambitious target, to say the least, and one only juggernauts like Activision typically manages to hit. So, Sega's vision for this super game initiative represented a massive gamble on their part, seeking to break into the highly competitive world of live service games, aka attempting to make their own Overwatch clone. Bearing all of this in mind, let's discuss Sega's project that fits this absurd mold. Originally pitched internally as Project Keaton back in 2017, because why not name it after the Batman actor who coincidentally starred in the now cancelled Batgirl film? Rather than being created in Japan, a Western group, Creative Assembly, would handle the future flop. Creative Assembly is a British video game development company known for creating the Total War series, which combines turn-based strategy with real-time tactics. Founded in 1987 by Tim Ansell, the company initially focused on developing sports games and ports, but it gained prominence with the release of Shogun Total War in 2000. This game laid the foundation for the Total War franchise, one of the most successful strategy games series to date. In 2005, Creative Assembly was acquired by Sega, making it part of Sega's portfolio of game development studios. Since then, it has continued to produce critically acclaimed titles, not only in the Total War series, but also in games like Alien Isolation from 2014, a survival horror game based on the Alien movie franchise. Their connection to Sega allows them to leverage the publisher's resources while maintaining creative freedom, and the Sega Super Game might have been Creative Assembly's biggest chance yet. Well, biggest chance to make fools of themselves at least. In a sad turn of events, like many creatively bankrupt entities from the West, they sold out and pitched a hero-based multiplayer extraction shooter because, of course, that's what the market needed, more bloody hero shooters. In this one, players would engage in zero-G combat, steal epic merch from billionaires, which for some reason included Sonic the Hedgehog figurines, and try to escape with both the loot and their lives. All set against a rather peculiar backdrop, which now exists only as a faint memory of a game that never saw the light of day, and thank goodness for that, really. Do we really need yet another overly corporate shooter set in a generic sci-fi world? I mean, what genius in the boardroom thought, yes, this is exactly what people want, a soulless copy-paste of every hero shooter ever made, but with even less personality. Why do these companies think we're dumb enough to actually play this? Like, sure, we're all just lining up to spend our free time controlling yet another lifeless, cookie-cutter character who's had all the creativity squeezed out of them in the name of market research. It's almost impressive how they managed to make space and lasers feel this uninspired. Seriously, what is the obsession with trying to give us these? For some reason, the Big Evil Corporation would create a game that would position the Big Evil Corporation as the villain. Oh joy, another cutting-edge narrative innovation, a giant tech company called Clout, because, of course, figures out how to mess with gravity. Naturally, they use this mind-blowing breakthrough not to better humanity, but to herd the masses escaping Earth like sheep. You know, like these AAA publishers who keep trying to herd us into playing their embarrassing surface game crap. Their big masterstroke, turning Mars into a glorified tax haven playground for the ultra-wealthy. Yeah, The whole narrative is essentially just a massive swipe at Elon Musk and his SpaceX fantasies, but with a twist of corporate dystopian flair. It's a scathing parody, but not without irony. If this game had succeeded, people would still be giving their money to the very kind of corporation that this game pretends to criticize. But wait, it gets better. Back on Earth, one of Clout's fancy gravity gizmos goes kaput, causing the planet to implode in a matter of weeks. They call this disaster the Crack, as if naming it something cool makes it less of a catastrophic screw-up. However, that does sound like an extremely British way to save face, so credit where credit is due. Naturally, Earth's leaders panic, steal some ships, and manage to save a whopping small handful of people. The survivors, they get the royal treatment banished to floating slums called the Taint. Yeah, really. Where 3 million souls now slave away as space miners, barely scraping by. Fun! Meanwhile, on Mars, everything's peachy, except for the fact that these super rich are bored out of their minds. Clout's brilliant solution to existential ennui: ditch politics, art and religion, because who needs those, right? And focus entirely on the brand. Because what truly defines human existence is not personal achievement or purpose, but owning rare stuff. And guess where the most valuable treasures lie? On broke Earth, of course. So Clout sends in their plunder ships to grab all the forgotten cool clothes, gadgets and whatever else is lying around on the desolate husk of a planet. Truly, a narrative masterpiece. Naturally, not everyone in the Taint, how poetic, is thrilled with this brilliant dystopian utopia Clout has so graciously provided. Some ungrateful souls just can't accept the scraps they've been handed by their corporate overlords, or heaven forbid, let the ultra-rich on Mars have their playground in peace. These so-called rebels, because of course they are rebels, have the audacity to raid the plunder ships, steal back treasures, how noble, and play hero to the rest of us, mere mortals. They call themselves Hyenas, which conveniently enough also happens to be the name of this cutting-edge masterpiece from Sega. How original. For those who experienced this one, they were treated to a single map. Yep, just the one, featuring retail spaces lovingly dedicated to the pinnacle of human culture, the 1980s. The highlights? Well, there's Hiroki, a Sonic fanboy in a DIY costume, complete with plushies and Mega Drive armor, which, to be fair to Sega, is far more interesting than any character from Sony's Concord abomination. You also get gems like Commander Wright, a wannabe space explorer who balances his idealism with a heavy dose of sarcasm. Then there's the Pro, who storms into battle looking like he's fresh out of a prison yard, complete with a Richard Nixon mask. I mean, really? Could the symbolism be any more on the nose? He could be a crook after all. Let's not forget Prima, short for Prima Donna, because apparently no AAA hero shooter is complete without a tattooed ballerina. Really pushing the boundaries of great character design here. Of course though, there were even more unforgettable characters to discover if you could stay awake long enough. Now, earlier this year, you could still head over to the game's website at playhyenas.com, where the remnants of Sega's latest money pit are on full display. However, since Sony's Concord disaster, the whole thing has been swept under the rug and instead redirects us back to creativeassembly.com. Fortunately, thanks to Top Hat Gaming Man covering Hyenas back in January, the website's past is well documented. When you visited the website, it was almost eerie, like the franchise was stuck in some kind of suspended animation. For a while, it was like Creative Assembly was in denial, refusing to pull the plug on their doomed brainchild. But looking back on all of this, Hyenas, just like Concord, it's perhaps always seemed destined for the digital graveyard, unlikely to ever see a full commercial release. When it was live earlier this year, the page still urged you to join the PC closed beta, as if that was somehow going to revive the lifeless ship. The last update from the developers would state, The Hyenas PC closed beta has drawn to a close, and we have to thank you all for making it a rousing success. A galaxy's worth of players swarmed to the plunder ships and our servers to experience a taste of what Hyenas has to offer: merch, mirths, and zero-G madness. Giving players a hands-on experience with the game is exciting enough and obviously a massive benefit of running a closed beta, but it also gives us a wealth of invaluable information as we continue to develop Hyenas. We got so much great info from the PC closed beta, testing out game elements, studying player habits, and discovering and squashing bugs. As a result of all of you playing so many matches, we've been able to gather a ton of useful data, which will help us improve the game as we move forward. As you all know, if you played the PC closed beta, zero-G movement and combat is a huge part of Hyenas and a key skill to master if you want to win games. The total distance travelled in zero-G by our players was over 105 million meters. That's about 2.5 times around the Earth, which we have on good authority is actually further than a marathon. That's a long way. We also want to shout out the community. The love and effort you've already put into Hyenas is humbling. A game is nothing without players after all. We literally couldn't do it without you. Some of you even went the extra mile and strove for those world firsts. Congrats to the following. So what's next? We can't announce anything just yet, but rest assured that there are plenty more Hyenas heading your way with a plunder ship's worth of updates and improvements based on your feedback. Keep an eye on our socials or here on the site for information as it drops. Thanks again to everyone who took part in the Hyenas PC closed beta. Whether it was for one match of plunder riots or hundreds, we'll see you all again soon. What a lie that last line would turn out to be. Here we see a dazzling display of self-praise disguised as an analysis of what is clearly yet another disaster in beta gaming. A galaxy's worth of players, they claim, yet paradoxically the galaxy didn't seem enthusiastic enough to lift this high-budget game off the ground. In a fantastic example of toxic positivity, they declared their closed beta a rousing success, which in today's gaming development jargon seems to translate to a perfect storm of server outages, myriad bugs, and an overall lackluster gameplay experience that players were subjected to. Adding insult to injury, they sign off with a cheeky "we'll see you all again soon," despite this appearing to be the final communication from Creative Assembly on the game. Sega's and Creative Assembly's handling of the Hyenas debacle is a masterclass in corporate indecision and backpedaling. Initially, they paraded the game as a dynamic contender poised to rival the likes of Fortnite in vibrancy and appeal. However, in the starchy confines of investor meetings, they were still puzzling over its fundamental operations. Despite early dismissals of a free-to-play model, Sega's resolve wavered under media scrutiny by August 2023, leaving the door conspicuously ajar for such a model. 1 month later, in a turn that was abrupt as it was predictable, Sega announced the cancellation of Hyenas. The accompanying press release, dripping with corporate speak, blandly noted the decision as a strategic retreat from lower profitability in the European market. It's an about-face that underscores not just the cancellation of Hyenas, but a broader contraction of ambitions within Sega's European divisions. A series of moves that could leave enthusiasts and insiders alike wondering if Sega's left hand knows what the right is doing. In fact, if you know about Sega's disagreements between its East and West divisions from the 90s, in some ways this story almost feels like a throwback to the good old days. You have to love the console wars. Sega's financial forecasts from the beginning of the year painted a grim picture, with the company bracing for a stinging $95 million loss for the fiscal period ending in March 2024. This was hardly surprising given their scramble at the time to axe several projects and tighten their corporate belt. Perhaps this financial hemorrhaging explains Sega's nostalgic pivot towards projects that are cheaper to produce, reminiscent of rifling through the attic for items to sell at a garage sale rather than innovating new products. Sega has optimistically dubbed this phase the Power Surge, a branding exercise that seems almost ironic as the company grapples with diminishing clout and cash flow. In reality, this so-called surge might be better termed a power cut, as Sega appears to be tripping over its own financial cables rather than surging ahead. To be fair, at least we have the Yakuza series and the Atlas games. It's almost as if there's an unwritten law in gaming. If you want a great experience, choose Japanese games. This is because the West is in a phase where it continues to produce some of the most soulless games ever made. You know, the generic garbage put out by the likes of Ubisoft for modern audiences that don't exist, rather than, you know, trying to make something fun that actually impresses gamers. It's as if they are more concerned with filling a template than with the artistry of game creation. In contrast, Japanese developers on the whole at least seem to approach development as dedicated artisans. They appear to see themselves as mere components in a grand scheme, striving to produce something truly magical that transcends individual identity, resulting in titles that are often truly memorable rather than overly corporate cookie-cutter cash grabs. No matter how stupid games like Hyenas were and how little projects like Concord learned from this abomination, the likes of Metaphor and Like a Dragon actively remind us why our hands stayed glued to our controllers when playing games from the land of the rising sun. Don't forget you can score massive discounts on incredible games like Space Marine 2, Black Myth Wukong, Metaphor and the all-new PC version of Final Fantasy XVI through my affiliate links below. Save up to 90% on thousands of modern AAA, retro and indie titles just by using the links in my pinned comments. Snag amazing deals and support my channel at the same time. Or if you want to support what I do in a more personal way, then access my forever growing behind the scenes cosplay library and more by becoming a backer over on Patreon. I'll see you all again in the next video.